and welcome to my channel. Today I will be doing a reading recap from the month of September and going over the books that I hope to read in October. I ended up reading a couple more books than I originally had on my September TBR, which is super exciting. I just love the feeling of being excited to read books and kind of reaching for them first instead of like going to just scroll on my phone or to like watch a TV show, because I really enjoy reading. So I'm very happy that I was not only able to complete my TBR from last month, but also exceed it. So let's get right into it. The first book I read in September is Daydream by Hannah Grace. I absolutely adore Hannah Grace as an author, and I know a lot of people find her first book, Icebreaker, kind of cringy, but I loved it. So I ended up giving this book 5 out of 5 stars. I literally don't care what anyone says about this series ever. The Maple Hills series is spectacular and I love it. So I don't care what everyone else thinks. I love it. I will say one of my biggest critiques of this book is that you can absolutely tell that Hannah Grace is not an oldest daughter, and I'm saying that as someone who's a youngest daughter. And I say that because one of the main struggles that the female main character deals with in this book is placing boundaries, basically, with her role as an oldest sister and not kind of taking the place of a mother. Not necessarily even taking a place, but just she's so involved in her family's lives. She's doing so much for them that it's almost basically like she is their mother, which is true in a lot of oldest daughters like scenarios, and I know that, but just the way that Hannah Grace writes it, I can tell that she's not an oldest sister. As a matter of fact, I think either at the beginning or at the end, she shouts out her older sister and is like, I love you, like, you're amazing, like, thank you so much for taking care of me when we were younger, that kind of thing. That's really my only critique, and even then, the book is still great. So, yeah. I will admit this is not my favorite book by Hannah Grace, but I do think that Haley and Henry are my favorite couple from the series. Yeah, that's that. On to the next one. The next book I read was The Wicked King by Holly Black. I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. This book was honestly, I don't want to say confusing, but I don't really know what word I'm looking for, so I'm just gonna say confusing. And by confusing, I mean every plot twist that I feel like I should have seen coming, I absolutely did not. And every plot twist that should have been like really shocking and I should not have called at all, I called. Like way before they were revealed. Which was honestly kind of weird, but I did still have some surprises, so it didn't feel like the plot was too predictable. This is the second book in a series, and I will say that because I knew the name of the last book, I kind of knew where the ending of this book was going. I just didn't know the specific details. So while it was definitely still a shock to me when I read it, I kind of saw it coming, I guess. And honestly, I was kind of upset with Jude, who's the female main character in this book, because she really let her guard down in the last couple of chapters, and that made me, honestly, really sad. It's just she's such a smart character and she's like always calculated and thinking ahead, so the fact that she didn't see that coming even a little bit was just shocking, I guess, almost out of character. Though I will say the ending of this book was such a good cliffhanger that I had to immediately move on to the next book in the series, which is my next read from this month's TBR. The Queen of Nothing by Holly Black. I ended up giving this book 5 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. And do you want to know the moment that I knew I was going to rate it 5 stars? Spoilers, by the way, just skip forward 10 seconds. When I read the words, Locke is dead, I was like, oh, this is a 5-star book. Oh, this is the best book in the entire series. I was like, I can literally just stop reading the book entirely and be completely fine with how this ended. I was so happy to hear he was dead. So relieved. So relieved. My friend that recommended this series to me in the first place recommended that I buy the second and third book together so that when I finish the second book, I can just immediately start reading the third book. And at first, I thought she was just being kind of, not dramatic, but dramatic, because she absolutely loves this series. I think she would say that this is her favorite book series of all time. So I was like, oh, she's just really passionate about it. Like, she just really loves this series. I doubt I'll feel the same way, but I'll get both of them just to calm her down a bit. And boy, was I wrong. Boy, was I wrong, because the minute I finished The Wicked King, I picked up The Queen of Nothing so fast, because I was just so distressed by how that one ended that I was like, oh, I have to know how this story ends, you know? And I'm very glad I did, because I think this is actually my favorite book in the series. Another thing that I loved about this book is that I could not have called the ending if my life had depended on it. Like, I did not see the final plot twist coming at all, and I was so relieved. So relieved when everything ended up being okay. But I was so, like, shocked because I was so convinced that there was no other way to get around this obstacle, if you will. But Jude found a way because, again, she's a super smart main character. The next book that I read was Heartless by Elsie Silver. I have mixed feelings about this book, truthfully. Because, if I'm being honest, I enjoyed this book a lot more than I was expecting to. I went into this book knowing that it was like a cowboy romance, and that's really all I had in mind, other than obviously what I read off the back. But basically, there's a 13-year age difference in this relationship, which I thought would freak me out a lot more, and it didn't. And I don't know what that says about me. But also, they're both consenting adults, so whatever, you know what I mean? Another trope that I was kind of shocked that I didn't hate was the nanny trope. I thought I was going to be a lot more grossed out by that, but I wasn't. So that was nice. Though I will say, and this is a big spoiler. This is a big spoiler for this book. So if you have not read this book and don't want to be spoiled for it, skip forward a bit, because I'm about to ramble and rant about a trope that is a huge spoiler, okay? This book is the first time that I have been surprise pregnancy troped. And it made me want to throw up a little bit. I'm gonna be totally honest. It made me sick because I hate that trope. And the only other time that I read a book with a surprise pregnancy trope was It Ends With Us. And that one technically wasn't really a surprise to me because I knew that that was a part of the plot before I read it. But this one, I went in completely blind. So when she tested to see if she was pregnant, and she was, my heart shattered. I'm so serious. I almost stopped reading this book. But it was so late in the game that I was like, no, you just have to pull through and push through. It's gonna be okay. This kind of ruined everything for me. And realistically, as much as it pains me to say it, the trope made sense to the plot. I don't want to talk about it. But it did. I'm not gonna explain it because thinking about it too long actually makes me sick. But the point is, while I do hate the surprise pregnancy trope, I didn't hate this book. And I didn't hate how it played into this book, I guess. I was a little distressed. Distressed enough that I gave it 3 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. Again, despite the fact that I really did enjoy this book, I was just so upset that I was like, this cannot get a high rating. And I don't know, maybe some point in the future I'll go back and change it to a higher rating, but I really cannot bring myself to do that right now. Like I said, this is actually a great book, despite the trope that I don't like being thrown in there. at the end. But I don't think it's gonna be my favorite in the series. I loved the characters. I loved Cade, and I loved Willa, and I loved Luke, who was a cutie patootie. Love him to death. But I don't think this is gonna be my favorite in the series. The fifth and final book that I read in September is You'll Be the Death of Me by Karen M. McManus. I rated this book 4 out of 5 stars on Goodreads. Admittedly, I kind of just grabbed this randomly off my shelf because after I finished Heartless, I was just really in the mood to keep reading. So I just picked up a random book from my shelves and started reading. And I think technically I finished this within like 24 hours, which is crazy. But it was a really good book. I really enjoyed it. I've read quite a few books where it's a murder mystery that's basically solved by high schoolers, but I think this one might be the most realistic one I've ever read, which kind of sounds weird, but I don't know, just the way everything happened made sense in my brain and like seemed like something that could happen in real life despite how horrible that sounds. I really appreciate how easily the story flowed and how all the plot lines tied in together, and there were constantly like new things happening and new characters and new events that were like putting all the pieces together in the main characters' minds. And I cannot even begin to express to you how incredibly overwhelmingly relieved I was when there was not a love triangle in this book. Because based on the cover, it's a girl and 2 boys. I was like, unless one of them is gay, this is gonna have a love triangle involved in it. And gonna be honest, that's really not a trope that I enjoy. Sometimes it can be pulled off really well, but for the most part, I'm just like, ugh, put that away. Just like, let's focus on one person and not have to flip back and forth between options. I will say though, there's a cliffhanger on the last chapter of this book, and I don't think there's ever gonna be a second book. Which kind of sucks, gonna be honest, because I would really love to see a second book, a continuation of this story, though I'm not really sure how exactly that would flow, considering the main plot line of this book was closed off and was tied up. There's just like one loose end, so I don't know if the author would be willing to do like a short novella type deal, doing a couple more chapters even like as a bonus from Barnes & Noble, like a Barnes & Noble edition. I just really want more of it. I just really want more. And that is the last book that I read in September. So now I will go into my October TBR. I'm kind of doing a similar thing that I did last month where I have a shorter TBR so I don't feel super stressed out to follow it necessarily, but just enough books that I feel motivated to read that month. Also, because it'll be October, I tried to pick a couple more scary thriller books, I guess. So let's get to it. The first book on my October TBR is called The Maidens. I'm honestly super intrigued by this because I always see The Silent Patient as a book that everyone like is obsessed with, and I haven't read it yet. It is on my TBR, but I haven't read it yet. But it's written by the same person, so that's super exciting. A basic overview to the plot of this book is that a young girl who is a part of this cult-like fan club of a professor at the university she goes to is found murdered, and a group therapist who has a close tie to the girl is determined to prove that the professor that the fan club is like surrounding is the murderer. And that just sounds so interesting to me and very October-y, you know what I mean? This book has been sitting on my shelves for a very long time, so I am very excited to actually start reading it. The next book on my TBR is called Layla. Again, a general overview to this book is that a couple goes on a vacation to kind of rekindle this love that they lost after the woman in the relationship suffers from like this terrible accident, and it kind of turns her into a different person almost. I just want to say two things about this book, okay? One, I'm really not a Colleen Hoover fan necessarily. I've read It Ends With Us, It Starts With Us, Verity, and I think that's it. I wouldn't say that she's a bad author necessarily, though I haven't read all of her books, so I guess I can't really be a good judge of that. But anyways, I just don't love her in general all that much. But I got this book a couple years back because I saw a YouTuber that I really enjoy, Ava Jules, had read it. Full disclosure, I know the entire plot of this book. Ava explained it in her video, like all the plot twists and stuff. And despite the fact that I had literally just gotten the book spoiled, I was still very intrigued and actually wanted to read it for myself. So with October coming up, and this book being one of Colleen Hoover's more thriller type books as opposed to romance, I wanted to give it a try. And the last book on my TBR for October is The Deal. And I know what you're thinking. Katelyn, this is not a very October thriller mystery book. And you are completely correct. This is a hockey romance book. And I don't care. Listen, I know myself, and I know that I am not going to want to read just a bunch of thrillers and books that are really intense and low-key kind of scary at times, back to back to back to back with absolutely no buffers in between, because that'll just freak me out. So I decided to throw in a romance novel. It is a hockey romance, which if you have been watching my videos for any length of time, you'll know that I love a good hockey romance. I mean, literally, I read one last month. But I feel like I always see Elle Kennedy's, like, hockey books, but I've never read them, so I'm going to give them a try. This book is actually kind of similar to Daydream, or I guess technically Daydream is similar to this book, as this one came out first, but I digress. In that it is girl tutors boy because she wants dating experience, basically, is what I'm getting from the back anyways. It's not that exactly, and I'm sure there are going to be some major differences, but I am very excited nonetheless. But that is all for my TBR and reading recap video today. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!